Thank you all for watching I-80 Sports, and welcome to the NHL Interchange, where today we are wrapping up the NHL playoffs. Thank you all for watching I-80 Sports. I'm Brian. He's Tom. Make sure you follow us on i80sports.com. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at i80sports_sportsNHL and on Facebook at the I-80 Sports Discussion Group. And make sure you watch us every Monday night for the NHL Interchange, where we will be here every Monday night. Tom, how are you doing tonight?
Doing well. We have some interesting trades that happen. We have a little bit of interesting series going on tonight with Game 6 coming up. So let's just get right to it.
Let's jump right in. I agree. So what we're going to talk about first, before we get into the NHL playoffs, before we get into talking about Game 6 of the Stanley Cup, which, to remind people at home, Game 6 of the Stanley Cup playoffs will be tonight at 8 p.m. finally on NBC on national broadcast, which will be nice to see rather than surfing through channels to NBC Sports. So that'll be on tonight at 8 p.m. where the Tampa Bay Lightning will take on the Dallas Stars in Game 6 of the Stanley Cup. But before we move on to that talk, we are going to talk about a few trades that happened throughout this week that we need to cover right now. So the first trade that we're going to cover right now is the team that I'm currently wearing, and we're going to continue that trend if I can. The Pittsburgh Penguins have traded Patrick Hornfist to the Florida Panthers for Mike Matheson and a prospect. And fun note about this, I think there's some animosity between the Penguins and Patrick Hornfist, because there was a photo that has floated around Twitter of Hornfist dumping his Penguins gear in his driveway. So, Tom, what's your reaction to all this?
You know, I know that he's a little upset with that gear being dumped in the driveway and all that, but, the writing maybe should have been on the wall for this when they made that trade to bring in Kasperi Kapanen. Now, Hornqvist is now, I believe, 34. He hasn't had more than 40 points in 17-18. Now, you're basically taking a 40-point guy and him and a 40-point guy in Kapanen, and Kapanen is 24. So now you got a guy 10 years younger with the same output who has potential to get better. Jimmy Rutherford, like I said, is trying to go for this again, and he's trying to go with what he knows. And the way Jimmy Rutherford has ran this Penguins team over the last few years, he's leaned on Crosby and Malkin, and then sort of had this system of interchangeable parts with these wingers, young wingers who either developed in Pittsburgh's minor league system or maybe who were sort of an afterthought elsewhere and brought him into Pittsburgh, and they thrived. And that's what happened with Hornqvist. And I think he has the same type of thinking now with Kapanen, because he's bringing in, like I said, a 40-point guy who's 10 years younger. And maybe he just said, you know what, out of all these guys I have on the wings here, out of my top six, Hornqvist is probably the most expendable right now. And, he's going down to a good team in Florida. They're a team that's, they have the talent. They just, for some reason, haven't been able to turn the corner. They're playing in a tough division. They also got a very good team in the New York Islanders in the playoffs this year. So we'll see if bringing Hornqvist down there, maybe you stick him with Barkov, and he has the same success that he has with Crosby up in Pittsburgh, and maybe that'll be a catalyst that'll launch Florida into the next level, which, people have been saying for years, Florida's going to turn the corner. They haven't really done it.
And you're pretty correct on that. And I mean, we've all been kind of waiting for Florida, and it has felt like for the past 2 years, it's just like, oh, you got to watch out for Florida. You got to watch out for Florida. And we're still kind of waiting. We're still in that waiting period to see if it's really true. And I think with the talent that they currently have, I think it's absolutely true that they can really get something done in the next couple of years, especially with the influx of talent that they have. Bringing on an experienced player like Patrick Hornqvist, who's been on some Stanley Cup teams for the Penguins in the past, I think more helps than it does hurt anything. He can still be a good contributor in their top nine. He can play on the first line, second line, third line if they need to, be a situational type of hockey player. He's a guy with great hockey sense and playoff experience to boot, which for a younger team, especially a Florida team that doesn't have a lot of playoff experience, save for maybe DeAndle, there's not a lot of people on that team that have really gone deep into the playoffs before and know what it takes to really go far in the playoffs. Now, on the flip side of things, we look at Mike Matheson, who's now going over to the Pittsburgh Penguins, he's a younger left-handed shot defenseman. He'll be 26 next season. He's a decent top 4 option. The only thing that might kill him is times where he has gotten more minutes. The season where he got the most amount of minutes, where he averaged about 22 minutes per season, like per game, he was a little overexposed. He tended to give up the puck a lot in the defensive zone. He had tendencies for giveaways, and it was a killer for him. But there's also the chance that with new coaching, with a change of scenery, maybe we start getting into a better form of play, more defensively sound. And this is a kid that does have some offensive upside. He's had 20 to 30 points in seasons before, and he's young as well, which absolutely helps the Penguins. They're trying to get younger and getting a younger influx of talent, and try to dump some of those older pieces, Patrick Hornfist being one of them. But we'll just have to see what ends up happening on the flip side for both of those teams.
One little note about Matheson. I was looking on Daily Faceoff before. Now, obviously, that's just predictions right now with these depth charts. Only Mike Sullivan is going to know what he's going to do with that D. Right now, they have him projected to be playing on a third pair over there in Pittsburgh. Obviously, things can happen. Mike Sullivan can always change the pairs. Letang gets hurt all the time, so that may rocket him up into the top 4. But right now, they have him on that third pairing right now. But like I said, that's just prediction right now. We don't know what's going to happen when things do start back up.
And this is also very, very true. So now let's move on to the second trade. Kind of flew under the radar a little bit. The New York Rangers traded their veteran defenseman Mark Stahl and a second-round pick to the Detroit Red Wings for future considerations. Now, Tom, this does kind of hit home for you, being our resident New York Rangers fan and New York Rangers apologist. What's your immediate reaction to this trade?
My immediate reaction, there's about 2 things. The number one thing is I was never the biggest fan of Mark Stahl. I believe that he should have been let go 5 years ago when he was up for a new contract. They should have traded him then. He was projected, I remember when he was drafted, to be a number 1 defenseman, to be a guy who could run a power play, and just be your number 1 guy. Power play, penalty kill play, all over the place. It never really happened. He sort of was showing that a little bit before he got that concussion in 2011, 2012. And then the biggest problem with that was when he was out, it kind of launched Ryan McDonough into that number 1 role and relegated him into a second pair guy. The contract was a little bit of an albatross, and honestly, Stevie Y is doing us a favor. It's opening up some cap space so they can maybe try and re-sign Jesper Fast and Brendan Lemieux. I do think that they also have Strome and Tony DeAngelo, who both are RFAs and are up for contracts as well. But I got a feeling one, if not both of those guys, are going to get traded. But it does open up some cap space to maybe bring back Fast and Lemieux, who they definitely want in their bottom 6. Fast is a great defensive player, great penalty killer, and Lemieux just brings that sort of pest, that sort of edge like his father did back in the day, that throws some guys off and it'll keep the heat off some of the Rangers stars. So I think it's good. Stevie Y's doing us a favor, opening up cap space because Detroit's got a ton of it. Stahl, maybe he'll be a veteran in that room. Detroit's a very young team. He'll be a veteran in that room. He's been in those playoffs. He's been in those battles. So, his experience there may help Detroit. I don't know if it's going to skyrocket Detroit into the playoffs, but it may help Detroit develop a little bit. It may help their guys develop a little bit.
Well, I think if anything, it gives the Detroit Red Wings a mentor in the locker room of veteran presence that is absolutely helpful. And they have some highly anticipated prospects. I mean, just to name a few, Joe Veleno, Moritz Seider, Philip Zadina, all guys that have been drafted in the past 2 to 3 seasons who could use a veteran to kind of guide them through the process of entering the league and really kind of getting their feet wet in the NHL. And these are guys that are all highly rated around the league. And Mark Stahl certainly has seen his ups and downs throughout the years. He's been on good Rangers teams. He's been on bad Rangers teams. And entering a situation where this is not really the best Detroit Red Wings team at the current moment. This is not a dynasty Detroit Red Wings team, but this is certainly a culture change right now in Detroit that Steve Yzerman is trying to put into place right now with Detroit and really bring them back into the playoffs and keep them there for a long time. And having a guy like Mark Stahl in that locker room can help. Where is he really going to play realistically on this team? I mean, who knows? I mean, he could play as high as maybe your second pairing defenseman. He could probably be your third pairing defenseman. He could even be a healthy scratch on certain nights. But he's not going to be there to score a lot of points. He's not going to be there to eat a whole ton of minutes. He's there for the presence. He's there to help the younger guys out. Plus, this is also another good move for the Rangers because they need to make room on the defensive side for Keandre Miller, who could possibly make an appearance starting next year, which could be huge for them. So this is all, to shift some money around and know before anybody even starts, this is not a move for Alex Pietrangelo. This is not, some kind of way to possibly go out there and get that. I don't see it. They need to be able to afford their top 6 guys over the next 5 years, and signing a guy like Alex Pietrangelo kind of, handcuffs them. So I don't see this as a move of like, oh, they're going to go on a real tear to try to get Alex Pietrangelo. I don't see it. I don't see it happen.
And what people forget is they have Jacob Trouba there. He didn't have the greatest of years this year, and most Ranger fans, if somebody doesn't come in and they don't score 50 goals and 100 points and break every single record in the league, they're a bust. I'm not giving up on Trouba yet. I think Trouba played well against Carolina in that series. Trouba was the only one who was hit, and he was really, really playing nasty back there. I am not giving up on Jacob Trouba yet. So that's one that's flying under the radar. A lot of people aren't talking about him. So, yeah, I'm not – you can't bring Pietrangelo, and you got to give Trouba another chance here. I think last year was an outlier. I think he'll be fine.
I tend to agree that and this was a Rangers team that had some growing pains. They have some younger guys that needed to really kind of pick up the slack, and they're going to pick up even more of the slack next year, and it's going to help a guy like Jacob Trouba to really focus on his game overall. And I definitely don't – this year was an outlier for him as well. And that's coming from a Devils fan. I hope you understand that this is fully coming from a Devils fan. So I have my reason to be like, nah, he's a bust. Like, just forget about him. But, I'm not going to do that to you. I'm not going to put you guys on edge like that. I'm a non-biased personality in that regard. But good trade on both sides for the Rangers and for the Red Wings. But before we move on to the Stanley Cup talk, because that is what we are here to do, there is one last note that we do want to mention today, because buyout season has officially begun in the NHL, and we have our first victim of a buyout. Forward Bobby Ryan has been bought out by the Ottawa Senators, and I'll start with this one. I don't think this is a good look for Ottawa. I think their owner, Eugene Melnyk, proves time and time again that timing is really not his strong suit, and you're buying out a guy who just won the Masterton Trophy, who overcame his demons, that really put on a strong showing at the end of the season. And you have some angry Ottawa fans right now that it's not a good look to be buying out a guy who just overcame this. Now, I get it. He had a high contract, and he's a guy that's probably going to be playing bottom 6 minutes. According to Cap Friendly, his buyout is going to be a cap hit of $7.25 million over the next 2 seasons for Ottawa. Ouch. But it probably won't hurt them that much because they don't need to afford anybody over the next couple of years anyway. So it's the right time to buy him out. No matter which way you look at it, it's not a good look. Tom, what do you think?
It's really not a good look. I mean, and the thing with Ottawa is, too, it's not like they're up against the cap. They were one of the worst teams in the league. You're coming into a draft where you have the 3rd and the 5th pick. More than likely, they're going to pick a forward with that 3rd pick. They're going to pick a defenseman with that 5th pick. You have Brady Kashuk there. Brady Kashuk is still a young kid, though. You need that veteran presence when you have a team full of these young kids. You can't just throw them out there and say, okay, go ahead. You need to have some veterans in that room, and I think Bobby Ryan could have been that guy. Even if Bobby Ryan was playing bottom 6 minutes with that contract, who are you paying right now? Who are you paying? Kachuk is still on his entry-level deal. The 3rd and the 5th, I'm not going to go into who I think they're going to pick. I'll save that for next week. But the 3rd and the 5th is going to be a center and a defenseman, also on entry-level deals. You're not paying them. By the time Bobby Ryan's contract would have been up, it wouldn't have been counting against the cap. I really don't know what Eugene Melnyk is doing up there in Ottawa. Years and years ago, 20 years ago, he was considered one of the best owners in sports. The team had no money and would be in the upper echelon of the league every year. Now I don't have a clue what this guy is doing. doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't. Where he'll go, I don't know. I really don't know. An interesting thing I could see is maybe Colorado for some depth taking him. Maybe Boston, if Boston wants to get one more kick at the can next year. I could see an upper echelon team, a team contending for the Cup, trying to get him in there to have that veteran presence, like I just mentioned, that he could have had for Ottawa. But obviously, it's not happening anymore. I could see definitely a contending team taking a shot on him next year, maybe just a 1-year deal and see how it works. But yeah, this is not a good look on Ottawa. I don't know why they did that. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all to me.
Yeah, it's not a good look. You mentioned Colorado. I think that would be an interesting move for Colorado to make if they, no matter what, Bobby Ryan is going to be probably on a prove it type of contract, like a 1-year, low risk, high reward type of contract that nobody's going to break the bank to go out and get Bobby Ryan, especially at 34 years old. Colorado would be interesting because that provides a little bit more forward depth, especially on line 3 and 4. You have Alex Newhook that's also going to join the fray as well, and maybe it could be a mentorship situation there. Another team that could be interesting is Montreal, and maybe trying to relight the fire there. They did it with Ilya Kovalchuk last year on a low risk, high reward type of deal. They ended up flipping Kovalchuk, as we know, to the Capitals at the trade deadline for a handsome payoff as well. So maybe they could try to see if lightning strikes twice again. The other interesting team, now this is not necessarily a contender potentially, but only because of, the scenery. Don't be surprised if maybe New Jersey takes a small flyer on somebody like this, only as a veteran presence. He's from Cherry Hill area as well. He's from New Jersey. So it could be a team that could also kind of kick the tire on that as well. But the Devils are also possibly looking to get younger. They're looking at forward to our 26 and younger, according to GM Tom Fitzgerald. So we'll see where that goes from there. But if I had to predict who could get bought out also for the rest of this free agency, one name to kind of look at as a potential name, Olli Maatta with the Chicago Blackhawks. They need to cut some money somewhere, and it's either going to be Zach Smith or it's going to be Olli Maatta potentially. Tom, does a name come to mind for you in terms of buyouts that could happen?
Yeah, this is one that's really hurting me to think about. It's hurting me to say it. But Henrik Lundqvist, unfortunately, his name's been kicked around. Even with this trade, a lot of people thought it would be to keep him around. Unfortunately, that's not the case. I know Igor is the future, and I know they don't want to justify paying $8.5 million to a backup goalie. The question is, if they do buy him out, it's still not really going to help them with the cap issue. But I think it's just that the contract's a little bit of an albatross now. He's not playing at the elite level that he was. Even if he does get bought out, I don't know where he would even go at this point. There were rumors that he was going to retire and go play back at Frölunda with his brother. His brother, Joel Lundqvist, has since come out and said, no, that's not happening. He's back in New York to stay, and he's just trying to figure out where he's going to go from here. People were predicting what was going to happen as early as Friday. Gorton said it's not going to happen this early, so I'm wondering if either A, they're trying to see what's going on with the cap, or B, trying to see maybe if they could work a trade out for him before they do buy him out, and maybe buy him out as a last resort. But I don't know. As much as I hate to say it, I think that could happen. But who knows? Because everybody in the world thought it was going to happen on Friday, and it never did.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, there are going to be teams out there looking for a tandem goaltender. I do think Henrik Lundqvist might be past that. I don't know what he can serve as a backup goaltender. I think there is some value there as a 1B or just straight 2 option for him. But it's left to be seen. I mean, I don't think the Rangers are going to necessarily buy out. I think they're going to look for any means possible before they have to consider buying out with him. But it's for sure, I don't see him being on the opening night roster for the Rangers come the start of whenever this next season begins. It's going to be Georgiev and Shesterkin between the pipes for the Rangers this upcoming season. I just don't see how Lundqvist fits in. And it's quite unfortunate, especially for a guy who really, poured his heart and soul out for that Rangers team for, decade and a half. It's really quite unfortunate to see. But now we are going to move on from our talks of buyouts and, being sad about buyouts and things like that. We're moving on to the Stanley Cup final. So now we are going to be talking Dallas Stars, Tampa Bay Lightning. So as we talked about last week, we were only one game in. Dallas was up 1-0. Then we get through games 2 through 4. All of a sudden, and both of us said it last week, yeah, don't sleep on Tampa Bay. And sure enough, Dallas slept on Tampa Bay. They went up quickly, 3-1, until game 5, when off the backs of Anton Udobin and Corey Perry scratched and clawed and did some other illegal things to get back into this series, as we see game 6 tonight at 8 o'clock on NBC. Now, one thing I do want to mention about the past couple games in the Stanley Cup, not overall, just the past couple games, I feel like officiating has been kind of rough. It's been a little questionable. There was one call in game 5, an embellishment call on Braden Point, that if you watch the play, Corey Perry's coming up on him on a breakaway. He sticks his stick up in between his legs, as an obvious slash in the nether regions, and Braden Point obviously goes down because that is quite a sensitive area, but they also called an embellishment on Point, which I felt was a bad call. Tom, how do you feel about the officiating so far in the Stanley Cup?
You know what? It hasn't been great, and the funny part about this is that usually, more often than not in the playoffs, you see these refs put their whistles away. This year, my observation is they really haven't. They've been calling these games tight up until now. And that embellishment call you brought up, it's funny because it brings me back to a similar call last year in Game 5 of that St. Louis and Boston series. A similar thing happened. The refs looked the other way. I don't remember what players were involved, and that's my fault. I apologize to everyone listening here.
Hey, me too. It's okay.
Yeah. I just remember St. Louis had come down and scored to make it 2-1 and wound up winning the game. It was an obvious slew foot call, and they missed it. And yet this one they call. It doesn't make any sense. And, if I were a Bruins fan, and I've said this about Bruins fans, last year that call cost them the Stanley Cup. Now, this really didn't have much effect on the game at all, but it's just that the officiating, it's interesting. It's either they call everything or they call nothing, and it just seems to be every year in the finals there's that one call that they miss, and I just don't understand it. It's mind-boggling towards me.
And it's funny because, we talk about, there's always that one call. There's always that one call. And Dallas and Tampa Bay absolutely know that because they both have benefited by winning Stanley Cups because of calls like that with, feet in the crease. Back when Dallas won it back in, what was it, 99? And then
it was 99 with the whole goal. And then 04. The thing with 04 was, though, with Calgary and Tampa, there was – it was hard to tell with that one. It really was. It was hard to tell if that was a kicking motion or not. People are still going to dispute it this day, and the whole call is the same thing. They claim that they sent some memo out. Who knows? I mean, at the same time, I don't mean to ramble here, but at the same time, I think had that series with Dallas and Buffalo gone 7, I still think Dallas would have won the Cup in Game 7 at home. But yeah.
Much to the chagrin of Buffalo fans.
Yeah. But
they still have to deal with the fact that they might lose Jack Eichel, but
it is an interesting fact that you bring up here about that. But it's definitely been some questionable officiating. But then again, what Stanley Cup final doesn't have it?
Yeah, and that's true, and it's rough, especially because you made the really good point beforehand of talking about how we felt like the officiating has either been, okay, we're going to put the whistles away and let these guys sort it out kind of deal, or, complete micromanagement, which from an officiating crew, I don't know which one's worse, being too hands off or being a micromanager, because it leads to some really nasty things between teams. And, a bad officiating in any sport, whether it's hockey, whether it's football, whether it's baseball, it never ends well between two teams with bad blood. It does not end well. And hopefully, the officiating tightens up going into game 6 tonight. But going into game 6 predictions, let's talk about our predictions over the course of these potential next 2 games. Everything could end tonight. Who knows? But let's talk predictions. Tom, what is your prediction for the rest of the series?
You know what? I'm going to stick with what I said last week. I'm sticking with Tampa in 6. Fun fact that I was discussing with somebody last night was that Since 2006, every time a team that has been up 3-1 and has blown Game 5 but gone to Game 6, they've won it. The last time a team that was up 3-1 blew a 3-1 lead to take it to 7 was Carolina in 06. We haven't seen it since. Every other Cup final that's gone 6 since then has, with teams that have been up 3-1, the other teams have closed it out in 6. An example is Detroit in 08 and Pittsburgh in 2016, amongst others. I think it was 17 with Pittsburgh as well, but I'm not sure. No, that series was tied 2-2. But I know in 16 and I know in 08, both teams were up 3-1. They lost Game 5 at home, and they wound up winning Game 6 on the road to win the Stanley Cup. Obviously, there's no home or road here. It's always in Edmonton, but I do think Tampa is going to take it tonight. I hope not. I'd like to see it go 7, just because selfishly I'm playing hockey tonight and want to see Game 7 and want to see the cup get lifted. But I'm sticking with what I said, Tampa in 6, and I do think that they are going to take it tonight.
Well, my prediction, I'm going to stick to my guns from last week because I predicted Tampa Bay in 7, and I think I'm going to stick to those guns because I think Dallas could potentially rally tonight, based on a Game 5 victory and try to make things a little bit interesting. But at the end of the day, Tampa Bay has very much dominated this Stanley Cup playoff, especially, this particular round in general. And I just don't see Tampa Bay not winning this year's Stanley Cup. It would be really tough for me to see that. What's interesting for Tampa Bay going through the rest of the Stanley Cup, they are going to be without their captain, Steven Stamkos. He is officially deemed out for the rest of the series, which is rough. He only got to see a couple minutes of ice time in his first game back. Still scored a goal, a really crucial goal for them, but it still hurts to see him gone and to have him just have to walk out onto the ice to actually hoist the Stanley Cup if they end up winning. But I want to talk about, before we break tonight, how are Conn Smythe, our playoff MVP predictions have evolved? Because I can definitely say for me, they have evolved for me. But who are 3 people, particularly, Tom, that we need to look out for the Conn Smythe trophy?
I'm still like I said, I brought Victor Hedman out of the blue last week. I'm still saying Victor Hedman. I'm still saying Braden Point, and I'm still saying Dolby for Dallas. I think if it goes 7, you have a better chance of Dolby or Heiskanen from Dallas winning it. Dolby. I'm literally saying Dolby. I should be saying Hudobin, but I'm sorry. But I think if it goes 7, you have a better chance of seeing someone on Dallas win it, whether it be Heiskanen or Hudobin. But I'm still saying the safe bet right now is probably either Braden Point or Victor Hedman.
I think all of those guys are safe bets. I think Hedman, the prediction that you made last week with Hedman was right on the money, and he's only been being better in this Stanley Cup final. Already 10 goals by a defenseman in this Stanley Cup final, which is great. Anton Hudobin has been one of the main reasons why Dallas sees a Game 6 right now. So certainly I think there is a great chance that if they make it to Game 7, we could see Hudobin winning the Conn Smythe, even if they don't win the Stanley Cup. Has happened before, like I mentioned last week, J.S. Shiger with the Anaheim Mighty Ducks winning the Conn Smythe over Martin Brodeur in that Stanley Cup final where the New Jersey Devils won the 2003 Stanley Cup. Another name I wanted to put out there is, you said it would be, kind of obvious to maybe look at Braden Point. Another obvious name on the Tampa Bay side of things, Nikita Kucharov, who has a good, solid number of points in the Stanley Cup final. And I think a guy with him who currently leads in points in of the guys remaining in the Stanley Cup, he could be a guy I could also see winning the Conn Smythe trophy. So he could be a guy to look out for that. If I had to pick a potential favorite, if Dallas makes it to Game 7 and loses, I'm going to go with Anton Hudobin. If Tampa Bay wins it tonight, it will depend on who does what. I would say if Nikita Kucherov gets himself a point, I think it will end up being Nikita Kucherov. But any last thoughts on the Stanley Cup before we break, Tom?
You know what? I'm pretty good on my end. Like I said, I think it's going to end tonight. I was hoping that Stamkos would pull like a Lanny McDowell or like a Willis Reed or something and, come out in Game 6 or Game 7 and play again. But, I guess he's just so injured right now that he can't. Interesting fun fact is that in 1993, to end this, in 1993 when Montreal had won, Dennis Savard was injured and it was his first cup. And Guy Carpenter was the captain. when Montreal won the cup on home ice, Dennis Savard came out and Guy Carbonneau passed the cup right along to him. So same thing, unfortunately, is going to probably happen with Stamkos. As a fan of his, I would love to see him play, but obviously I guess he's too injured and just can't do it.
Yeah, and that hurts to see. But we're just going to have to see what happens because the Stanley Cup continues tonight. Game 6, 8 p.m. on NBC. Tampa Bay Lightning facing off against the Dallas Stars. And that's going to just about do us for tonight. But before we go, we got some hype for next week because we're diving right into the NHL draft next week because the NHL draft takes place. The first round takes place Tuesday, October the 6th at 7 p.m. on NBC Sports, where myself and Tom will be coming to you live from the NHL draft. Well, not from the NHL draft, from the comfort of our own rooms, reacting to picks, talking about picks. Send in your comments during that live stream. We'd be happy to talk with you guys throughout. We're going to be here for the first round. And we're also going to have draft coverage next Monday night as well with a special guest talking about some prospects to look out for in this upcoming NHL draft. But I've been Brian. He's been Tom. Make sure that you follow us on i80sports.com, on our Twitter handle at i80sports_sportsNHL, and on our Facebook group, i80 Sports Discussion Group. And you can catch us every Monday night on the NHL Interchange. And like I said, this has been the NHL Interchange.